Hey guys, this is Neil Gewertz with BlueFirePoker.com. I'm here bringing you part 2 of my 4-tabling session at 50 No Limit on Merge Network. As always, in these multiple part series, I recommend going back and checking out part number 1 to see what sort of dynamics and reads have been going on so far at the tables. I'm not sure if this is going to be a 2 or a 3-part series just yet, so we'll see how much of a video we get through and take it from there. So with that being said, I'll just go ahead and get into it. And I did want to discuss this pot on table 4, even though it is a small pot, it doesn't really become a big one. But the few things I wanted to discuss are, first of all, I'll play it just a second more, I decided to check this flop as opposed to leading out with my up and down straight draw. Basically my thought process here is, I have two very loose opponents in the pot. You see the player to my left is a 73-3 VPIP pre-flop raise, so he's basically playing everything, and the button's a looser player as well. So I didn't think I was getting enough folds, and given that there's a flush draw present, I think if a diamond turns, I basically have to check fold my check fold. So I think I have to give up on a few too many turn cards. If this is a rainbow board, I could barrel just about every turn other than maybe a 10 or a 6. So I do prefer leading out. And also, what I wanted to say is, spots like this, even though they are small, and I'm not 100% sure what the, correct play really is, whether you should be leading out here or not, I can't say for sure against someone who's just this loose. It's hard to say against a player whose ranges are this wide, and I really don't know his post-flop tendencies, and the fact of the matter is he'll probably go broke before I really get to figure him out. I'm not gonna go too much more into it in this video, but this is the type of spot which you can do a little bit more work on, particularly if you do find yourself in these kind of smaller pots against players who maybe aren't so bad. You should, do the work, figure out what their range is, and see what exactly is the right play when you have a kind of marginal amount of equity, whether you can check call or lead out. But with that being said, I just decided to check, and my plan was to basically check call once, and mostly check fold turns where I don't improve. Similar enough things can be said on the turn to what I said on the flop. Basically, I didn't want to lead out because I just didn't feel like my hand had enough equity. I thought I had just enough to check call. Really felt I had the best hand a lot, but playing the river at a position with initiative seemed just a bit too difficult, so I decided to continue playing passively. And I mean, again, talking about table 4, I'm not 100% sure what I would do on this river. I would likely check call again and assume my opponent has enough busted diamonds in his range, and he'd bet straight draws, and he'd bet, I'll pause it just 1 second. He'd bet, 10s on the flop, so his 7's really good a lot, unless he has like a bigger 7, which he might not value bet twice and good, but luckily it didn't come up, so I'll call the river a check decide, and as I just said, I would likely have called. As we see on table 1, the button actually limped pre-flop and not open-folded, but it folded when checked on the flop. So that made it a lot easier. Given how tight the small blind is and that he looks like he's giving up, I'd really bet the turn regardless. And when he's checking twice here, he's probably giving up. Certainly with a pair of jacks, I'll consider it a, value type protection bet. Table 2, we certainly flop well with ace-3 suited. Just want to c-bet my standard amount here, and then on the turn I have a decision. As you see, my first instinct was to go for a check raise, or my first thought. But I decided to barrel again. Basically, my couple of thought processes are... Well, the first thing I thought is that I wasn't going to be barreling this turn a lot. If I have random overcards, I'm very likely check folding. And what I mean by random overcards are overcards without an ace. So if I have Jack 10 suited, if I have King, Queen, Queen, Jack, any sort of Broadway type hands to bigger middle connectors, I'm not going to be barreling, because it looks like my opponent is going to be floating this flop with a lot of pocket pairs which aren't going to fold the turn. Diamond draws, can fairly easily double float. As well as maybe if an ace-jack or something got stubborn on the flop, it again can float. So I don't expect to have a ton of fold equity on the turn. So this is why this turned into a bet for me. Even though it does look reasonably strong, I'm not going to be barreling here with absolutely nothing. I just felt there are too many hands in my opponent's range which he can call with, which likely check back, or, I'm not going to win a ton of money out of unless I start betting. And I certainly can be bluffing here. As I just discussed, I can barrel random ace highs, I can barrel diamonds, and I'm check folding my unpaired, undraw, no pair, no draw hands, like the king queens or whatever. So I feel like I have a pretty balanced range in the spot, and I'm happy betting again for value. If I do get raised on the turn, it is a difficult spot. I don't know that it's such a difficult decision. I'd likely call and reevaluate. But, I'm not in great shape against the value range. It's tough to say exactly what he'd be raising with. But once he calls twice, I think he has some sort of a middling pocket pair. And I just want to go for value again on the river. And I guess, while it's a bit slow, I'll say, going back to that ace-3 hand just to kind of finish up the discussion. If my opponent did check raise the river, or I'm sorry, it would have just been a regular raise. If my opponent shoved the river, I would likely have found a fold. I'm not beat there very often at all, but when your opponent takes call, shove the river line, I wouldn't think he's turning it anything into a bluff. He just likely would have flopped a full house or rivered one. Or maybe turned a straight. Over on table 1, this is I'll call it a mistake or whatever. Something I've seen a lot of players do. And again, I'll quickly discuss it just while nothing else is going on. And this is our tight player over here. And the hand I'm talking about is when they just got all in with Sick Life had kings and JMO had queens. He's a very tight player. At the time, he was playing like 7. His stats were even just a bit tighter than this. Right now, he's running at 29, but he had one less raise on his range at that point. And he 3-bet versus an under the gun player and stacked off with queens. And I think I've discussed this before, but I do think that's a mistake. If you have been playing very tight, 3-betting and stacking off with queens and ace-king is very marginal, particularly against under the gun players. So that is something you want to watch out for and know kind of what your image looks like. And even if you are up against a 35-23, don't expect that they're going to be so loose to be stacking off against, a perceived nit with a marginal hand. And as you see, even though he's up against a very loose aggressive player, I don't think he got unlucky to run into kings. I think when he 3-bets any players under the gun open, they're really only continuing with aces and kings. Maybe they'll call the 3-bet with ace, king, and queens. And, maybe jacks as well. But, the point there being... I'll pause that for a second, because just to discuss with Jack 7 suited next. So, the point there being, again, discussing the hand I wasn't in, where JMO had queens and Sick Life had kings. If you're playing very tight at a table and you 3-bet stack off with queens or ace-king, particularly against an under-the-gun raiser, but really in any situation other than, button versus cutoff or button versus blinds, you're going to find yourself dominated a lot. Just quickly on table 3, it looks like I folded my Jack 7 off on the button. I could certainly open as well. I don't know if I was concerned. I am running pretty loose aggressively at that table, and I guess the blinds weren't all that tight. One other thing I did want to discuss, and I realized while I was going over this video, is I did take a few passive lines, and I think that would be an example of one of them. Jack 7, you should really be attacking the button and attacking on the button, attacking with kind of all your reasonable hands until you're really given a reason not to. 7-4 offsuit, I'm fine folding, but the Jack 7 a bit too strong to really be folding, even if you are running a bit loose aggressively. Unless the players in the blinds are both extremely loose and aggressive, you should still be opening very wide. Well, let's see how this 10's hand plays out. I thought I just folded pre-flop. I thought this was how the action went. So, what we know so far from JMO As it looks like when he does free bet, he'll have some sort of a value range in that, he free bet and stacked off of queens against an under the gun raiser. So again, against an under the gun raiser, I think he's mostly got a value range. As I discussed, or was previously discussing, I think his value range is likely too wide, but I certainly still think it's a value range, and tens just don't do too well against that. I think my initial assumption, or the initial information that I had on him that he was a tighter player, might prove to be wrong. Maybe he's a bit more of a standard tag. But still, as far as I know, he's pretty tight, and just because this is the second free bet in a short amount of time, the first time he showed up with queens, it wasn't a bluff at all. Queens are certainly strong hands. So I decided to give him credit for having a hand there, assuming he's, just free betting for value too often to want to call out of position with tens or 4-bet as I guess it would be a 4-bet fold, or 4-bet stacking off would be pretty spewy. So even though it sucks folding a hand that strong pre-flop, just for replay.